Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT-06 and BT-06, and the starter decks add a lot of new and powerful cards to build and update some current and existing decks. And one of those decks that I'm going to be talking about updating is going to be the Imperialdramon deck. So the Imperialdramon deck, it doesn't seem like it wants to go anywhere. It's still going to be a deck that's going to be hanging around just because the core and base of what it's trying to do is really good at just attacking the opponent's security multiple times, all in one turn in fast succession, allowing you to easily take and swing games in your favor. And just as a quick reminder, I am going to be hosting a Win a Playmat event on October 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so feel free to hop into my Discord and register for the event through Limitless Games and play on my Discord channel. Links to those will be in the description below. So without further ado, on to the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DemiVeemon. So this is the BT-03 DemiVeemon, and this DemiVeemon is still really good because it's acting as a solid draw engine for the deck that's interacting with the jamming mechanic, which the current Imperialdramon is wanting to interact with. So what this DemiVeemon is doing is a when attacking ability once per turn. If this Digimon has jamming, then you get to draw 1 card, and that's just really good because it helps the overall consistency of the deck. And then we are going to be running a 5th Digitama. The 5th Digitama slot could really be anything you want it to be, but I'm choosing to run the new starter deck version of DemiVeemon at 1, just because it has this nice inheritable ability where during your turn, if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, which is not a very hard thing to do in blue, considering blue has lots of ways of drawing cards, then this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP, so it's just acting as a generic way to DP boost all of your other Digimon, which is a little bit easier and a little bit more powerful than the other DemiVeemon from BT-02. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Elecmon. So Elecmon is still just a very decent card to be running just because he has some very efficient stats where he hard plays for 2, evos for 0, and has 3000 DP, just making him a good card to use all around. Next, I'm going to be using 4 copies of Veemon. So this is the BT-02 Veemon, and this Veemon is another draw engine card for the deck where he has this nice inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon becomes unsuspended during your main phase, then you get to draw 1 card. So the deck does want to unsuspend its Digimon, and we do have ways of unsuspending our Digimon, so that way we could trigger this ability to gain some additional card draw. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Veemon. So this time, this Veemon is going to be the BT-03 Veemon, and this is the Veemon that has a really powerful synergy and is supposed to go with the Imperialdramon line because he has the native ability of jamming. So what this ability of jamming does is the Digimon can't be defeated in security battles against the opponent's security Digimon, which is really good, and his interaction with Imperialdramon means that he is the prime rookie that we want to be sitting on the field and aggressing with. And we even want to aggress with this card early on because that way we could use it in combination with the DemiVeemon that we're going to be running 4 of, so that way we could start drawing cards really early while breaking the opponent's security as fast and efficiently as we possibly can, so that way we could try to close out the game when we're going to be going into our Imperialdramon. And then the last rookie of the deck is kind of a flex spot. You could kind of say Elecmon is also a flex spot. You could kind of mix and match and do whatever you want with those 2 slots. But for right now, I'm just going to be using 2 copies of Madoki Betamon. So Madoki Betamon is a brand new rookie to come out in BT-06, and this is basically acting like the Terriermon of the deck, where he has this nice powerful ability where during all turns, your opponent can't gain memory except by tamer effects. So locking the opponent out of gaining memory off of their Digimon and options is really important because there's a lot more Digimon and options that are going to be playing around and manipulating the memory, and Madoki Betamon is a really solid card at shutting a lot of those strategies off, forcing them to try to respond to Madoki Betamon before they can continue with that, taking a lot of pressure off of some of our other cards potentially. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon, we're only running this card for the stats, and the only real stat that I care about with this card is the fact that he evos for 1. So if you wanted to, you could replace him with any other card that evos for 1, it doesn't really matter. We just are using him to try to get into our higher stages as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Lobomon. So Lobomon, for all intents and purposes on what this deck is trying to do, is just an alternate win condition for the deck. So we're just using him because he has this nice ability where we could Digivolve him from our hand on top of one of our blue tamers as if it was a level 3 Digimon to then just swing with and try to close out the game that way. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gorillamon. So Gorillamon is going to be the deck's dedicated blocker. We only care about the fact that he does have the blocker ability, but it's also nice at the fact that this card also evos for 1 in case we do need to use it as another tempo efficiency card. So I do like the versatility on how we could use this card, but we do have to acknowledge that he does have 5000 DP, and there is a lot of removal that are targeting Digimon with 5000 DP or below. So if you wanted to, you could split him up and run some Grizzlymon, but I do just like what Gorillamon is doing still as a whole, and I do think there's a lot of value in the efficiency of just evoing for 1 and having a decent blocker still. And then the last champion is going to be 2 copies of Veemon. So this is the brand new Veemon that's coming out in the ulforce Veemon starter deck, and this Veemon is actually doing something pretty decent that the deck kind of was lacking before, in the fact that he has a nice inheritable ability of a when attacking trigger that isn't limited to once per turn, where if you have 8 or more cards in your hand, then you get to return one of the opponent's level 3 Digimon back into their hand. So a recursive bounce effect on multi-swings that's not limited to once per turn is just really good because blue has a huge problem with interacting with the opponent's Digimon on getting them off the field. So this is at least some way of interacting with the opponent's Digimon, getting them off the field, even though it is returning them to the hand. It's still better than just leaving them on the field, so that way they could potentially aggress. Next, onto the ultimates, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Imperialdramon. So Imperialdramon is a very central and pivotal part to how this deck wants to function, and he's one of the most important cards in the deck as a result because of everything this card is doing. So what this card is doing is he has 2 abilities. He has a native ability and an inheritable ability. His native ability is just jamming, so he's another card that we could aggress with because of the jamming ability, making his swings very, very safe. And on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If this Digimon has Imperialdramon in its name, then we get to unsuspend it. So this is the card that's allowing us to swing multiple times and hit for lots of the opponent's security because of his interactions with Imperialdramon. So the base rundown of it is you're going to be swinging with Imperialdramon, then unsuspend because of Imperialdramon, and then Imperialdramon's going to swing for another time. Then Imperialdramon's inheritable ability is going to be triggering, and you can make Imperialdramon swing for a second time. So that's 3 total attacks off of 1 potential card, making this card very, very powerful and very, very important for the deck to be running as a whole. And then as far as the other ultimate of the deck, I'm going to be running 4 copies of DemiVeemon. So as of right now, I'm not super thrilled with DemiVeemon. I think he's still a pretty solid card because he has 2 very powerful keywords of piercing and jamming, and that's all he really has going for him outside of being a green Digimon. But because he's a green Digimon, he kind of does make Imperialdramon a little bit greedier, where it's harder to run a whole bunch of other megas to support him. But I digress, and he's just a necessary evil to make Imperialdramon as consistent and powerful as we possibly can. So at worst, you could use him to swing into the opponent's security. The piercing helps bypass the opponent's defenses in the case they're trying to block you, and the jamming just keeps him alive when he's swinging into the opponent's security. And then you could do the same type of play where you Digivolve into Imperialdramon to unsuspend and swing with Imperialdramon. So at worst, he's still just helping play Imperialdramon and making Imperialdramon still a very good Digimon to be running. Next, on to the Megas, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Imperialdramon. So Imperialdramon is going to be the only Mega of the deck because he's the only Mega that really works well with the deck and makes the deck relatively easy to play. So he does have an Evo cost of 5, but because we are playing both DemiVeemon and Imperialdramon as our level 5s, his ability reduces his evolution cost by 2, meaning he's actually only going to Evo for 3. So that's really, really strong because this card also has the jamming ability also, so his attacks onto the opponent's security are also going to be really safe in case we do hit higher DP Digimon than what he could handle in security, because blue doesn't have a whole lot of ways of DP boosting their Digimon, and on top of that, he has this nice when Digivolving ability to unsuspend all of your Digimon with jamming, and this includes himself. So if you do have a field of jammers, then he's going to unsuspend all of those jammers, and you could get a lot of extra aggression out of your cards that way. So this is what makes the jamming Veemon so good. This is what makes DemiVeemon still pretty good, and this is what makes Imperialdramon really good, because they all have jamming, and Imperialdramon can unsuspend them all on top of any other Imperialdramons that we have on the field if the game ever gets into that state. So this card just allows us to swing lots of different times because of his interactions with our ultimate level Digimon, and this card is still really strong just because he can hit really hard and really fast. And then the last Digimon of the deck is going to be the only level 7 of the deck, and that's going to be one copy of Omnimon. So this is the BT-05 version of Omnimon, and we're only really using this card as an alternate way to try to help finish or close out games as quickly and efficiently as we possibly can. So what's making this card so strong is the fact that he has this nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to unsuspend this Digimon, and paired up with his secondary when Digivolving ability is his first when Digivolving ability of gaining the Blitz ability, which means he could attack even when the memory goes onto the opponent's side when you Digivolve into him. So the whole intended idea is you're going to swing your 2 to 3 times with Imperialdramon, and then Digivolve into Omnimon for basically a forced swing, and that could potentially end your turn or close out the game with, all depending on the current state that you left your opponent with. But if you did leave the opponent with some security left or were unable to close out the game, then he also does have a nice ability where during all turns, if an opponent's effect would try to delete Omnimon or return him to the hand or deck, then you could prevent him from leaving play by trashing a level 6 Digimon in his Digivolution source. So even though you might not be able to close out the game, it's still pretty decent to Digivolve into Omnimon because he has some built-in protection on top of some slightly increased stats, making him a little bit harder to deal with. Next, on to the option cards, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Rattlestar. So this doesn't necessarily have to be Rattlestar, it could be really any removal option you want to be running or playing around with. I just think Rattlestar is really good for this style of deck because of what this card is doing. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability where you get to return one of the opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon back into their hand, which is just your very stereotypical bounce effect for its cost, but you do get the added benefit where if the opponent has 3 or more Digimon in play, then you get to return one of the opponent's Digimon back to the bottom of the deck instead. So that's a huge upgrade for the opponent just having 3 or more Digimon on their field, and it's not going to be very hard for them to have 3 or more Digimon on their field because we are blue and we're barely interacting with their Digimon as is. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost. So Blue Memory Boost is another really good new addition to the deck just because it helps make the deck even more consistent. So the deck does have a tiny bit of consistency issues just because we want to find our pieces as quickly as we possibly can, and having Blue Memory Boost help us find our pieces is just very strong because it allows us to check the top 4 cards of our deck and add 1 blue Digimon among them into our hand, and the rest go to the bottom. The only things this doesn't hit is going to be Omnimon and DemiVeemon, but we don't necessarily care about those cards. We just want to try to find Imperialdramon and Imperialdramon as quickly and consistently as we possibly can, because that's the primary goal of what the deck is trying to achieve, because those 2 cards have very strong synergy together. And on top of its main ability helping us dig, it also has a secondary main ability, which is Delay, where we don't send this card to the trash after using it. It goes into our battle area, and it stays there until we want to use it at a future turn to just gain 2 memory. So that 2 memory could enhance and extend a lot of our plays, making our turns even stronger than they normally would be. And then it has the security ability of basically putting itself onto the battlefield, so that way you could use the delay ability. So this card is just a very strong card to be using to help with the consistency of the deck. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Hammerspark. So Hammerspark is still just a very powerful card to be playing with, just because for 0 you just gain 1 memory, so that could again enhance and extend some of our plays, making even more powerful plays possible, with the nice added security ability of gaining 2 memory, which is effectively taking away 2 memory from the opponent, and that could be pretty devastating depending on the situation that you're going to be leaving the opponent's memory with, or they could put their own memory with. So I do like what this card is doing still, and I think it's very important in the deck, just because if you don't find your tamer, between the memory boost and Vulcan's Hammer, you have alternate ways of gaining memory to make your plays as powerful or efficient as you possibly can. But speaking of our tamer, the last card of the deck is going to be the only tamer of the deck, and that's going to be 3 copies of Davis. So Davis is still just a very powerful and important tamer for the deck, just because he's going to be acting as the deck's dedicated memory fixing tamer. So if our memory is ever less than 3, he's just going to hard set it to 3, which is very important because that's kind of the key and crux to the combo, is being at 3 memory, so that way we could safely digivolve Imperialdramon into Imperialdramon and not pass the turn, allowing us to aggress as hard as we possibly can, all thanks to Davis. And then on top of that, he has a nice on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 blue and 1 green Digimon among them into our hand and place the rest on the bottom, so he's even helping with the deck's overall consistency on top of fixing our memory. So for the most part, that's just the core or foundation for the Imperialdramon deck, and there is just a lot of other tech and tools that you could consider running to upgrade and change the deck to your liking. So if you wanted to run some other Digitamas in the deck, not only just as the main, but as the sub as well, Upamon is a really good Digitama to help you try to draw cards for the opponent having Digimon without inheritable sources in play, which just isn't very hard to achieve because that just naturally happens anyway at times. And then you also could run the BT-02 DemiVeemon to just try to help DP boost your Digimon for them unsuspending themselves. Then you also have Gammamon that helps you draw cards with his on-play ability, because if we're going to hide a Digimon in raising, then we need to try to advance our board state, and Gammamon drawing us a card for advancing our board state is also very good. On top of the fact that we also have Syakumon to help with decks that want to decrease their Digimon's Digivolution cost. So this is another good way to kind of tech in against the mirror or other decks that want to reduce their evolution costs, like Green or Lilith Loop. So this is another decent card to consider thinking about. Then we also have Gabumon as another really solid Digimon to be playing around with it to try to increase our Digimon's DP. Then we have other consistency tools like Dracomon to be running, where he could help look for cards with Dramon in its name. So the main cards we're going to be looking for are Veedramon, Imperialdramon, and Imperialdramon. So there's a whole bunch of different cards with Dramon that we're already running for Dracomon to try to take for some very similar reasons why we want to run Gabumon. Then if you wanted to have another decent card draw engine, then you could also consider running the new starter deck Veemon, just because he has this nice inheritable ability that's also not limited to once per turn, where if you have 7 or fewer cards in your hand, then you get to draw 1 card, and he also has a warp potential into an ulforce Veedramon if you want to splash in some ulforce Veedramon support. Then we do have some other really decent Digimon to consider running in the champion level, where we have Frigimon to act as a champion level jammer. Then we have Tobiomon as another really good tempo efficiency card because he evos for 1 as a level 4, which as I stated was pretty good before, and he does hard play for 3, so in case we don't see a rookie, he's also acting as a pseudo rookie. Then you could also consider running Grizzlymon as an alternate blocker because the different stat lines actually do matter. Then we also do have Cordramon, which is another pretty decent Digimon to think about playing with for his security ability and his on-play ability. And then, as I stated before, we're not really looking to run any other ultimates in the deck just because they all make Imperialdramon worse if we run them. But you could consider running some other ultimates in the deck if you wanted to. I just feel like it's not really needed. So you could just think about running a couple of different megas in the deck instead. So that way you could try to keep your consistency on your ultimate level slots, and we do have ulforce Veedramon to be considered playing around with because he also warps off of the Veemon, so we have a way to skip and bypass our level 5s and our level 4s in case we want to squeeze ulforce Veedramon in the deck. So we do have the old one that interacts with Tamers, which I don't think we're going to be able to use it very efficiently, but we do have the new one from the starter deck, which also has a when digivolving ability of bouncing one of the opponent's level 4 Digimon back into their hand, and a when attacking ability of being able to multi-attack as long as we have 8 or more cards in our hand. So this is just another very strong card to be running for the deck that's kind of fitting on theme with what the deck is trying to do. And then if you do want to run a green mega as like a tech mega to try to make Davis even more consistent and more powerful by having more green cards to pull from, then the best green card we have is going to be Nidhoggmon to basically just use for his Digiburst ability to suspend all of the opponent's Digimon down with 5,000 DP or less, and then put all of the opponent's suspended Digimon back to the bottom of their deck, regardless of their DP or level. So this is just another very strong card that's helping us interact with the opponent's field in some way, shape, or form while fitting on color with what the deck is trying to do. But he is a little bit harder to use just because the only card we could Digivolve him with is going to be DemiVeemon. And then we do have the other Omnimon set to think about running in the deck, so you could run BT-01 Omnimon for his multi-attacking potential, adding the Imperial back into our hand, so that way we could reuse him later. And he also has some built-in removal that's very, very strong. Or you could even run X-Antibody, just because X-Antibody has a nice when-attacking ability of removal, and a ability that triggers on the opponent, turning off their ability to attack. It doesn't turn off the when-attacking skills, but ending the attack just helps you defend better against the opponent. And then we do have some other very powerful option cards we could consider running. So we do have Howling Memory Boost to try to pick off the opponent's inheritables and use for its delay ability to gain 2 memory. Then you do have other good removal options that you could consider playing, like Cocytus Breath and V-Wing Blade, just to try to interact and bounce the opponent's higher level Digimon back to their hand. You could also consider running any of the other ones that cost 5, but I think that Rattlestar is the best bounce effect for costing 5 compared to some of the others, but V-Wing and Cocytus are just good for bouncing a little bit higher than level 5s more consistently. Then as far as some alternate tamers that you could run in the deck, you could run Sora and Joe just to try to gain some additional memory for the opponent having a Digimon without evolution sources in play. So that's just generically decent, on top of the fact that it also can start trashing the opponent's inheritable sources for just our blue Digimon attacking. And you also could run Takumi as just another really good tamer to run for the deck because he helps us draw cards, on top of the added benefit of turning off or at least de-incentivizing the opponent from wanting to attack with their level 3s. Yes, it does also de-incentivize your level 3s from attacking, but we have multiple different ways of gaining memory to try to mitigate the ability of losing memory whenever we're attacking with our level 3s. But for the most part, this is just what an updated Imperialdramon deck is going to be looking like for BT-06. The core of it really isn't going to be changing a whole lot. It's just getting some new tech and new tools to try to help push the deck along and keep the deck as relevant as it possibly can. But the core strategy of just swinging multiple times in a single turn is still just very, very strong and very, very relevant. And even though the deck does seem a little bit weaker in BT-06 compared to the other formats, just because a lot of other decks are just as strong, if not stronger, and can keep up and control the deck more efficiently, doesn't mean it's still a bad deck just because it does have alternate ways to be played, and it does have various different techs and tools to handle different situations when those situations arise. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.